Evolution of Brain and Behavior, Chapter 6. So let's go ahead and get started. Not a very long chapter, but interesting chapter. Fascinating to me because I find evolution just fascinating. And also the whole concept of sexual selection is as interesting as well. Modern scientists see the study of the change of life over the ages due to natural selection and sexual selection as beneficial to understanding humanity from more than just its current snapshot view. This can be done through DNA analysis, where scientists compare the DNA of one species with the DNA of another. The other living animal that is very similar to humans at this point is the bonobo chimpanzee. Bonobo, that's pygmy chimpanzees. There's two different groups of them, chimpanzees and pygmy chimpanzees. These individuals have DNA that's 98.4% identical to humans, the bonobo. And this is the pygmy chimpanzee right here. That's a common chimpanzee, a little bit different gorilla, the silverback, orangutan gibbon, and old world monkeys. And as you can see, they're farther and farther away. Percentages of difference from humans. Scientists have been toying with the idea of evolution for a couple of centuries before Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace published their findings in 1858. Darwin actually published first, though he had been working on the theory for almost 30 years. And this is Wallace here, and this is Darwin, the individual that religious people like to pick on. In 1859, Darwin published On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection. Darwin made three main observations: that individuals of a given species are not identical, and we can see that just by looking at your neighbor, just by looking at your significant other, by looking at your mother and your father. Some of the variation is inheritable. The fact that possibly my mother had brown eyes, I have blue eyes, my dad had blue eyes, and as it turned out, well, and that turns out fairly well. My mother was 4'8". I'm 5'7". My dad's 5'7". So there are variations that are heritable, are inheritable. I have his blue eyes and I have his height. I'm not sure what I have of my mother's. Maybe when I was a child, I was her fourth kid, and she had no problem with 1, 2, and 3, but she said, "I just hate this kid. There's something wrong with him." And she was a nurse, and one of her nurse friends came over and said, "You know, Goody," her maiden name was Goodwin, so everybody called her Goody. "You know, Goody, the reason you don't like that kid is because he's just like you." And evidently, my mother kind of stayed away from me most of my young life, but later on when she got older and I got older, we used to talk all the time because, you know, we were really a lot alike, personality-wise, and that's why she couldn't handle me because I did exactly all the negative things that she represented. So did I. So, and that just bugged her to no end. She threw me out of the house a couple times. Not all offspring will survive, of course. And of course, she was hoping that I would be the one that didn't quite make it. But I did. I made it, and of all of her children, I was probably the most accomplished. I have 5 degrees, 3 advanced degrees. So there you go. I survived. Darwin would later add a fourth corollary, that of sexual selection. Sexual selection states that each sex exerts selective pressures on the other in terms of both anatomical and behavioral features that favor reproductive success. Now, normally among animals, the animal that the gender that is the one that is the most outlandish is the male, because the male has to attract the female. And how do they do that? Well, if you've ever seen a female cardinals are brown. In order for a male cardinal to attract them, they need red plumage. And the brighter red the plumage, the more likely that they will be able to reproduce. If you've ever seen a peahen, they're relatively small. They got long legs, but they have hardly any tail at all. But the peacock, the male of the species, has this outlandish, ridiculous tail. If you've ever seen them walking around, you think, how in the world does that ever survive? They can fly. I've seen them on top of barns. Um, Peacocks are fairly common in the South, so we used to see peacocks in when we lived in Mississippi. This is a mandrill, and the male mandrill. That's what his face looks like. If he didn't have the blue and the red with the yellow whiskers, then he would not be able to reproduce. The female, the back of her looks like that. Her reproductive area is blue and red, and so that tells him what he's looking for. Do humans participate in sexual selection? These are the Babila women of Africa, and as you can see, they have put plates in their lips to make them more attractive. This is a Chinese woman. She has done that to her feet. She's bound her feet to make her look more delicate. The smaller the feet, the more attractive. They don't do this in China anymore, of course. They stopped around the beginning of the 20th century. But until then, this was very common in China. So women, and it would make them, they couldn't walk, or they couldn't take a step. They had to kind of walk with a choppy little step. This is a picture of the Flathead tribe. I was down in, and that's what they did to their head to make themselves look more attractive. They would put these boards on an infant when their heads are flexible. The skull is flexible, and they would make themselves have this pointed head. I was down in South America, and it wasn't just the people. You know, the Flathead Reservation is over in the Rocky Mountains in around Montana. But I was down in South America in Peru, and I went to a museum and I saw manipulated skulls where the individual had done something to their skull. There was a heart-shaped skull. There was a very pointed skull, just like this. Uh, they did odd things to their heads in order to make themselves more attractive. Europeans are not immune to this. We have Africans and Asians and uh, American Indians. This is what they used to do to themselves. In order to be attractive, they needed to have the smallest waist they possibly could, and this is what they did. They tied themselves. If you've ever seen Gone with the Wind, Scarlett O'Hara is being pulled into her fancy dress for the party, and they're tightening up her corset so that she has this skinny little waist. Why would they do that? Well, they thought it made them look more attractive. What it does, it forces most of their organs up in either up or down, and usually it's up. So they would have large torsos. That's where all their organs were. That's where all their intestines were. Some of it's right here, but most of it is up above. Scarification. How do you attract a mate? You scar yourself. That's one way to do it. This individual is a Cherokee, and Cherokees were thought to be the tallest of the indigenous peoples of the Americas, and this is a pygmy. They are the individuals that rarely get up to 5 feet tall, and they are in the forests of Central Africa. And as you can see, he's probably 2 feet taller. He's in the 6 foot range, and this gentleman is in the probably close to 4 foot range. This is a Maori of New Zealand. He's not only supposed to look scary, but he's also trying to attract a mate. Without the tattoos, of course, then who would want to marry somebody that doesn't look scary? To scare off their enemies. As you can see, I don't know if you can see this, but these individuals have elongated earlobes. That's always attractive. These are the mountain women of Thailand. Some of the mountain women of Thailand, they try to make their necks look long. These used to be made out of gold, but now they're made out of brass. And that was part of their wealth. They also put rings around their legs. We weren't sure how this happened. Well, there we go. We weren't sure how this happened. What they're doing is they'll put these rings on, and it forces their clavicles down. Instead of really elongating the neck, it doesn't really elongate the neck. What it does, it pushes the rib cage down. These are Maasai. Maasai are herders, and one of the ways that they look for not the enemy, what they're looking for are predators because they have cattle. They bounce up and down, and they look in all 4 directions to see if they can see anything when they're up. And the higher that they can jump, the more territory that they can observe. So this is one of the ways that women choose a mate, is how high he can jump. These are individuals that live on the in the Saharan Desert, southern Saharan Desert. They consider themselves the most attractive people on Earth, as do most people, I guess. What is it that women are looking for in these guys? What they're looking for. These are males, by the way. What they're looking for is the ability for them to move their eyes independently. And they wear lots and lots of makeup. I was just reading a story about a guy that just kept putting more and more lip rings on, and now he's got 15. He's still a teenager, so it's hard to tell what he's going to look like when he gets older. I was just reading a book about it, as interesting as that is. And you can go overboard maybe, or I mean, some people think, well, if you don't have any piercings, then I don't find you attractive. So there you go. Whoops, there's a lady. I think this is a lady as well, if I'm not mistaken. Lots of tattoos, lots of piercings. Lots of tattoos, lots of piercings. Understanding the phylogeny species allows us to study the behavioral and neural adaptations that allowed animals to exploit particular ecological niches. Comparative studies may focus on specific differences between closely related species, or may be concerned with general principles across larger numbers of species. But in each case, the use of an evolutionary framework provides additional explanatory power. And there you go, there's a classification. And we will go through that right now. Or maybe we won't. Well, I guess we won't. Well, we're going to get into classification in just a minute. The principles of neural function revealed by comparative anatomy studies may often be generalized to many species, including humans. And the reality is rats, cats, monkeys, and humans all have the same structures in their brains. The major divisions of the brain are shared by all vertebrates, and the only difference is size, the size of the brain. And so, which is the more intelligent? Well, it really all depends on what you're looking at. I just listened to Stephen Hawking, his theory of time. It's a fairly short book. It's only about, I don't know, 150 pages. But I'd listened to it, and I was thinking the whole time, well, he's talking about dominance. And we like to think of ourselves as dominant, but there's a lot of rats in the world. And there's, didn't I tell you last week that, or maybe it's the week before, that the weight of all the ants on Earth equals the weight of all the humans on Earth? How can we say that humans are dominant when there's that many ants and that many rats? You can look at it a lot of different ways. Maybe rats, we are the drones, and the rats are the ones controlling things because we build them habitats to live in and we give them food. So, I mean, you can look at it a lot of different ways. Are humans really superior, or maybe rats will take over the world, or have already taken over the world, and we are just feeding them and giving them some place to live. And of course, we don't know anything about ants. Ants are all over the place. There's a lot of them, obviously. If the weight of all the ants in the world and the weight of all the humans in the world are the same. So how can we say that we're dominant? Maybe it's actually a world that's run by rats and ants, and maybe cats, because cats ignore us all the time. And there's a lot of them. I've got a lot in my house. My wife likes cats. The major divisions of the brain are shared by all vertebrates. Brain differences between species of vertebrates can often be directly related to their ecology and behavioral complexity. So we're the only ones that say, well, the largest and the most intelligent being, because rats, my goodness, there's so many rats in the world, and they've got the same brain structures that we have. So why should we say that we are dominant over them? Maybe we just feed them and give them some place to live. Such differences tend to be quantitative in nature. Relative size of brain regions or the size of the neurons is a good example. And so you may ask yourself, why in the world did you even think about that? And the answer is, this is a gorilla brain. This is a human brain. Why in the world did you even think about that? It's because Hawking was talking about alien life forms, and we don't know what those alien life forms might potentially be. And I was thinking, if someone came to Earth, if another life form came to Earth and they looked at humans, they looked at rats, and they looked at ants, who would they see as the dominant life form? I know, I had too much time to think. The field of classifying animals is known as taxonomy. Taxonomy is an ongoing endeavor Taxonomy can be done in many ways, including paleontology, studying fossil remains, comparing animal DNA with human DNA, putting paleontological information with DNA analysis in a study called convergent evolution. Two of the fastest swimmers in the ocean are tuna and dolphin. Each evolved for efficient swimming, and so there are similarities in their structure. However, the dolphin is a mammal and the tuna is a fish. Similar features due to convergent evolution is called homoplasy, similar development. Homology, study of similarities, looks at similarities between body structures of animals with common ancestry. A good example of homology is the forelimb of several mammals. Outwardly, they seem so different, but the structure is very similar. Analogy refers to two structures that have similar functions. And here we have the human hand and arm, and we have exactly the same structures in the dog's leg, and the same structure in a seal's flipper, and the same structure in a bat's wing. So a dog runs on his toes, on his fingers, those are the ends of his fingers. Classification of species begins in general terms and runs to more and more specific. Kingdom is the most general term. Living creatures are broken into 5 kingdoms: Animalia, Plantae, Fungi, Monera, which is bacteria, and Protista, which are single cell. We as humans are Animalia. The main subdivision of a kingdom is a phylum. 3 phyla are Chordata, Mollusca, and Arthropoda. Arthropoda has to do with feet or legs, and we are anthropod, aren't we? Or are we chordatas? I guess we're chordatas. We have spinal cords. The main subdivision of a phylum is a class. Some classes within the phylum Chordata, yes, we are Chordata, Mammalia, Aves, and Reptilia. Mammalia are mammals. They feed their young with milk. Aves are birds, and Reptilia are reptiles, of course, like alligators or snakes. The main subdivision of a class is an order. Some orders within the class: Mammalia, Carnivora, Herbivora, and Primates. And of course, Carnivora are meat eaters, Herbivora are plant eaters, and Primates are humans, gorillas, and monkeys. Chimpanzees are gorillas, are a form of gorilla. The main subdivision of the order is the families such as Canidae and Felidae. Canidae, of course, are dogs, and Felidae are felines or cats. The main subdivision of a family is the genus, such as Canis and Vulpes. Vulpes are fox, and Canis are dogs. The main subdivision of the genus is the species, such as Canis familiaris, which is the domestic dog. While Darwin's theory was widely accepted, no one really knew or understood how change took place until biologist Hugo de Vries. Working with primroses, de Vries proved that sudden changes were caused spontaneously by mutations. And this is a ruby red grapefruit, and an example of a mutation is when a ruby red grapefruit was produced that didn't have any seeds. I can remember when I was young, wow, we used to pull seeds out of grapefruits all the time. Now you hardly ever find any grapefruit with seeds. They're all seedless grapefruits, whether it's ruby reds or yellow grapefruit. Genetic studies subsequently demonstrated that chromosomes provided the building blocks of inheritance. Later, genes were identified as the building blocks of chromosomes. Watson and Crick demonstrated that DNA was arranged in a double helix made up of nucleic acid, and you get half of your genes from your mother and half of your genes from your father, and they match up. And as long as the DNA strands are complete, then you will potentially have um, a perfect human being, as long as they match up. Today, the Modern Genome Project gives us an ever-expanding view of the makeup of humans as compared to other creatures. And of course, the Genome Project has not only proven that humans are almost identical, um, but that we can compare ourselves to past hominids like a Neanderthal man. Researchers have determined that species who have to hunt for their food, such as humans and carnivores, have bigger brains than animals who don't have to search for their food, such as ungulates. And of course, this is a white-tailed deer, and he is an ungulate. And these two girls are carnivores. They are eating. This one's eating. Well, they got bacon. Yeah, she's got a piece of bacon in her hand. And she's got orange juice and water and blueberry muffin. And I'm not sure what that is, but that's bacon right there. So she's a carnivore and she's a carnivore. And that may be venison bacon. What do you think? Yeah, probably not. But an ungulate can find food just about any place. As long as there's something growing, he can eat it. Or she. This is a male, so we'll say he. The more novel the means of obtaining food, the larger the forebrain of the animal. Magpies have been known to dig up potatoes. House sparrows have been seen picking insects from car radiator grills. Crows have been known to drop hard palm nuts in front of cars that run over them and open them. And this is what a magpie looks like. That's what a sparrow looks like. And you guys have tons and tons of ravens on the Navajo Nation. And they're the biggest crows I've ever seen. But this is a crow. Birds who store food will have a larger hippocampus than birds who don't. The hippocampus is necessary for memory, thus a larger one is needed for those species that rely on memory for survival, like the acorn woodpecker. This is the acorn woodpecker, Clark's nutcracker, and the black-capped chickadee. This is a chickadee, and that's the nutcracker. Picky eaters have bigger brains. The differences between the brains of humans and the brains of other mammals are mostly quantitative. Rats and humans are similar in that each has a brain that represents about 2% of the total body weight. The basic differences have mostly to do with the size of the cerebrum of the human and the prominent increase in surface due to the gyri and the sulci. But both brains take up about 2% of the total body weight. That's a rat's brain. As you can see, it's relatively smooth. And there's the old bumpy human brain. Rats don't miss out completely. They have a much larger olfactory bulb than humans and so have a much stronger sense of smell. They can find food that's miles away. The nervous system of vertebrates have several similarities. They develop from a hollow dorsal neural tube. They show bilateral symmetry. Segmentation is present. Pairs of spinal nerves extend from each level of the spinal cord. The central nervous system and the peripheral nervous systems are separate. Localization is present. Certain functions are controlled by certain locations in the central nervous system. Anthropologists and comparative biologists assume that all vertebrates have these features in common because they descended from a common ancestor. Invertebrates are another story. There are 17 phyla to cover the invertebrates, while vertebrates are part of only one phyla. It has been estimated that for every human on Earth, there are over 1 billion insects. The basic plan, all vertebrates and most invertebrates share a basic plan that consists of a central nervous system and a peripheral nervous system. And this is a picture of a grasshopper, and as you can see, it's very similar to the human. A central nervous system and a peripheral nervous system. All vertebrates and many invertebrates, including mollusks and insects, have brains. The general evolutionary trend in both vertebrates and invertebrates is toward increasing brain control over ganglia at the lower levels of the body. Axon of mammalian neurons are surrounded by myelin, which helps them conduct impulses faster. Invertebrates have no myelin to speed up their nerve conduction. If we look at present creatures and their fossilized ancestors, we can see that the brain has changed over time, whether it is a bird's brain or a hominid brain. During making a cast of the inside of a skull to map the brain is referred to as an endocast. And here we have the modern human, and here are some of our ancestors: Homo erectus, Africanus, and Afarensis. Australopithecus afarensis, Australopithecus afarensis. And this is a modern blue jay, and if you take them back and look at what they look like, the bird's ancestors, eventually you lose the wings. Modern man, this is Neanderthal man, as you can see. Neanderthal man actually had a bigger brain than the modern man does. I was reading an article about what if, why in the world did Neanderthal man die out? And the answer is, and now we know that Neanderthal man and Homo sapiens, or modern man, lived in the same era. They lived together. But Neanderthal man did not survive. And they think that one of the reasons is because climate, he couldn't adapt to the climates, the changing climates. Total brain volume. Human averages 1,252 centimeters. Percentage of total brain volume, 80 watt. And that's it. Okay, I'll talk to you guys next week.